Namaste, viewers from JD India and JD USA. Welcome to JD USA live show. Today, we are talking about a remarkably important issue. Dismantling Hindutva globally is a seminar being organized in the United States, supported by many universities and many Hindus of whatever orientation who are participating in it. Remember, the title of the seminar is Unabashedly, very challengingly, called Dismantling Hindutva Globally. Now, to discuss this, let's dive in right away. Uh, we have Professor Praveen Sinha, who is a professor in California State University. He's a PhD, and he has been a tenured professor, a remarkably active person in the community life. He also has an society and association in Irvine, California, where he advocates the cause of India and the cause of Hindus very, very, very aggressively. And my second guest is Mr. Rajeev Singh. He's from Hindu American Foundation. Hindu American Foundation must be thanked, congratulated, and appreciated that they took the battle head on and they wrote to the various universities who were co-sponsors of this seminar, and they took the matter on. So let's get on to this right away. One thing which bothered me, and we have been on Clubhouse with Dr. Praveen Sinha and other people, and we have talked about the one thing which really bothered me. This particular seminar has been organized with such audacity. And, I was totally stunned by the fact that as a student of international banking and finance, you always depend upon market intelligence to know about your client and market conditions. I'm wondering, this particular program must have taken some time to coordinate and organize, right? How come nobody had any clue about it? None of us had a clue about it. And I include in it. It's not to blame anyone. Is that charity begins at home. We have to take the responsibility for what happens to us. So this is the question to every person who is watching the show, not watching the show, the global Indian diaspora, is how come we didn't know anything about it? And we are now ending up reacting. Dr. Sinha, you have a first shot at that.
Well, this has been a very long problem with our community. Shots keep coming at us, and we are trying to dodge it or respond to it. But to really understand what is going on, we should understand what their agenda is. Agenda is not simply to do things that come about randomly here and there as they appear to be. They're very concerted, they are very organized, and I'm sure Rajiv will have some more thoughts on it. But the way I look at it is that this is attack on Hindutva is basically attack on Hinduism disguised as Hindutva. Okay, they attacked Hinduism too. Some time back, there was a caste survey that was done by Equality Labs, and HAF played a very big role in that as well. And I really appreciate the efforts that they have put into it. But that was a straight attack on Hinduism. Now the attacks are coming on Hinduism-inspired ideologies, which is Hindutva. We should also try to understand what will be the next step. Where do you think they're going? And if we do not take proactive steps, we will be in trouble. This will be happening again and again. And as you will see from this seminar, they are attacking us more directly. They dare not do this to Islam. They will never do this to Christianity. But Hinduism supposedly is an open target. And it has been going on for quite some time. So I'll stop here, but I do want to talk a little bit later about where they're headed. And if we do not know where the next attack will be, we'll still be dealing with the way we are dealing right now, stumped and not knowing what to do, or immediately finding resources to undo the damage they're trying to do to us. This fly swatting approach is not the right way to go about it. Unfortunately, we are in this situation. So I will say that somewhere along the line, maybe later in this discussion or at some other forum, we have to think about what is their next step, what is their overall strategy and goal, and how do we counter it, because we have facts on our side. They have a strategy on their side. So we have to see how we can counter it. So I think I'll let Rajiv ji take that and then we move on.
Thank you, Praveenji. Rajivji, there is one thing which is very important, as Praveen Sinha mentioned, that somewhere along the line, if we don't take it seriously, we will have to bear consequences. And I recall in one of our conversations about Hinduism facing an existential threat, you had indicated that if we don't muster up and we don't coordinate, we will face an existential threat. That has been a subject matter of conversation. And I see this, a very coordinated attack happening. You know, different religious groups, different academic groups are using what I wrote down today morning. They are using disguises to portray things about us in a wrong way. Religion itself is using disguises to portray us in a wrong way. Like Sinhaji very correctly mentioned, Hindutva is political Hinduism. Why is it such an evil? And that's the tool used to attack Hindus as if we are the evil. So tell us about this, that how does Hindu American Foundation, you are doing an exemplary work in America to educate the policymakers in this regard. But what kind of support you get and how this particular thing is moving forward? I've been in touch with, yesterday Suhag Shuklaji came on one of the clubhouse meets last night. And, the matter is moving forward, but how does it look like? Give us the update on the HAF initiative that is happening today.
Absolutely. So namaste, everybody. Namaste to all the viewers. Glad to have your company here, Dr. Sinha and Vibhuti ji, as always. First of all, on the onset, I want to wish everybody a happy Onam and best wishes and felicitations for Raksha Bandhan today. So
we all join everybody on this wonderful occasion. Thank you.
Oh, fantastic. So that said, let me start with, first of all, the work that HAF is doing and acknowledge that the love and support of the community that HAF gets is what makes HAF HAF. Now, when you have an issue of this magnitude, there is no way that a small body, as organized as it may be, such as HAF, can shoulder or should shoulder the pain and the burden. So for that matter, many other partner groups have stepped in. But most importantly, what I'm noticing right now is that all across the United States, even abroad, there is a very grassroots agitation, a grassroots sense of wonderment as to what has suddenly been unleashed, apparently, on the Hindus. I want to pick up a little bit where Dr. Sinha mentioned the word organized and shine a bit more light on it. So a lot of people tend to think, and everybody has a different moment where they kind of get into the thought mode, but they tend to think that this is something very recent or new. This has never happened in America before. Hindus were safe thus far. What is going on? Well, to those viewers, I would like to remind them that this is 20, 30, 40 years in making. So when Dr. Sinha says the word organized, it is not a 5-year phenomenon. It is not a 2-year phenomenon. HF has been dealing with this for 18 years. Matter of fact, the need for HF, the founding of HF, is rooted in those very experiences in our universities, where our founders were told about their own faith, about their own religion, in terms so denigrating that despite a very illustrious professional path in front of them, which they are all pursuing, they still decided to come together and found HF. Now, that said, as you might imagine, when we are dealing with a 40, 50-year history of Hindu phobia in this country, and which can only be dealt with grassroots, there is a very tactical approach that we have to take sometimes, but there's also a very strategic approach, and that is where HAF comes in. HAF is so experienced and has such a wonderful staff and supporters in the community that we do strategic groundwork. So in this particular case, the moment this came to our attention, HAF wrote a letter of request, I would say at this point, to all the university presidents of the 41 institutions that were seemingly participating in it, and requested them to politely distance themselves from this Hindu-phobic, Hindu hate fest that is going on across our supposedly educational institutes of high esteem. So I will leave it right there, and then let's split this apart a bit more. Vibhuti ji, I think you'll be
Yes,
ready.
I got it. Praveen ji, what I wanted to also talk about is that this is an organized movement against Hindus. And it is not something. What is it that about us, the most peaceful community in the world, we are? And I'm proud to say that. What is it that frightens and scares these people, including the leftist Hindus who are essentially Hindus in name only, to launch this kind of a virulent attack of calling it dismantling? No, they're not even concealing their intent. Dismantling globally is a threat. What is it about us that makes them so vicious, so vile about their intent and the process?
I think part of it is religious. We have seen that in our history as well, when our temples were destroyed. This has been going on for quite some time, as Rajeev Singh mentioned. Uh, but I think stakes have been significantly raised, and I will ask Rajeev ji to comment on that in the next time when he gets a chance. Stakes have been significantly raised since the BJP government has come into power. So far, they view that as a benign movement which had no legs. And it was benign to start with. It never had any serious legs. And even when it gets in power, it has done, it does not have the kind of intentions that they try to portray it to be associated with, like, Nazis and so on and so forth, which is what the equivalence they make most of the time. Nowhere in the history Hindutva movement has done anything to kill people or to engage in the kind of genocide that they equate it with, which is again a false analogy. So something has changed, I would say, in the last, 15 years or so, 10, 15 years, and which has mobilized people like me. I was very apolitical, like a lot of people around me, and we have seen that this attack on us, nonstop, has a bigger agenda than simply against Hinduism. So the way I look at it is the following: when you have to destroy any community, you have to go to the basic fabric of it. I give an example of the movie Diwar, in which Amitabh Bachchan's hand was tattooed when he was a young kid, "Mera baap chor hai," and he became a criminal for the rest of his life and ended up dying at the end of the movie. When our children are raised in the USA, and we do not do a proper job in educating them about our Sanatan Dharma, and they can be made to believe that what they are following is an oppressive religion which is full of problems, and a narrative is created, you're basically dismantling the basic cohesion that Hindu community or the Indian community here has. And that has consequences. The consequences are not only on the psyche of our children, it also has consequences in terms of geopolitical issues that India faces. And I'm going to just make a prediction here, and I will let others look at it. This, what we see against Hindus now, is no different than what we see against the Jews. You may have heard of the Zionist movement, right? Israel is a Jewish state, created around same time Pakistan was created and India was separated from Pakistan, or Pakistan was separated from India. Uh, the narrative was created against Jews at the same time as oppressors and what have you. When the fact is that they were the ones who were basically subjected to extreme conditions like Holocaust. Indians have been suffering like that, but somehow the narrative has been turned around. They are oppressors, Hindus are oppressors, they come from a deranged ideology. Uh, but I think in the end, I think where we headed is basically where the Jewish community is headed, which is you will see something like BDS movement coming against us. That basically this is a dangerous ideology. It has to be suppressed. It is being practiced in India by BJP and Modi government, when good number of them have nothing to do with it, given despite the fact that it is not even dangerous. And then we'll see the kind of thing that is happening against Israel right now. My biggest concern is that unlike Israel, we do not have political clout. Israel has beyond belief strong political action committees. They have inroads to senators and congressmen for a very, very long time, and we are not. So I think all this is intended to put more pressure on India and take measures like boycotting Indian, putting sanctions on India or putting more pressure on India. And I think it has something to do with the Kashmir issue as well, which is very strongly contested by special interests in the US. So I'll stop here. Um, Rajiv, you can take it over with GS.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. The point is very important here. A lot of issues have come about. It looks like India in the modern 21st century has become a sudden threat to everybody's existence. To put it mildly or lightly, if I can say so. Why are we such a threat? Now, Rajivji, you have mentioned that HAF has seen this anti-Hindu bias for a very, very long time. Now, how do we explain the couple of things? It was with great sorrow, I would put it that way, that I saw the news that New Jersey Social Studies and Arts and whatever faculty and National Endowment of History, they have contributed significant amount of sums to Audrey Trushke, who is the band leader for the anti-India jihad or crusade, if I may say so, to study the political and sociological systems up to 2020 or so, the historical leading up to now. Another fodder given to somebody who is absolutely without any attempt to view it anti-Hindu, anti-India. So when the Rutgers University does something like this, I have two questions. One is, where did Rutgers or any other university in the country, where are the Hindu professors, Indian professors who can submit papers to obtain grants or do publications of this kind? Who is fixing our narrative here? On the media, we are trying to do what we are trying to do. But the academic vetting of something is equally important. The second part is, where are Indian parents in New Jersey? Why isn't anybody creating a furor in the society that demands freedom of speech? Nobody is even asking a question. What was the justification for a study like this? There are so many Hindu scholars here, starting from the most famous name, Rajeev Malhotra, sitting in New Jersey in Princeton area. Why
May I
is
take this
Rutgers not
question?
approaching? Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things behind it. First and foremost, you have to understand the so-called academic freedom exists. You can do research in whatever areas you think is appropriate till you can prove it. And I think that's what AJF might be trying to do as well, that this is basically Hindu phobia rather than attacking Hindutva. So I think that connection may have to be made somewhere along the line. But another thing to keep in mind is that the whole academics is on Hinduism. I think Rajiv Malhotra has even written books on that. The academics in the US who do research on Hindu are basically all Westerners. We don't have any Indians. And the Indians who got educated have been brainwashed. They start believing in the so-called critical race theory, which when applied to Hinduism, or it can be applied to any place, and the outcomes will never be pretty. I can assure you, whether when you apply it to Islam or you apply it to Christianity or any religion, it will never be pretty because it's just a divisive ideology. So these people who are doing this research or doing these projects are basically prodigies of these old researchers like Wendy Donegan and others that you may have heard of it, who have put together very, very negative narrative on Hinduism, and we had nobody even knew about it. They were doing it since 1960s, when most of us were not even getting educated here. So it has been a long body of research on which PhD students are doing research. Unfortunately, Indians who come from India don't know and become part of that narrative or that theory that becomes the basis for criticizing Hinduism. Talking about Two other things that you asked about. One is, why is Rajiv Malhotra not part of it? Unfortunately, there are credentials that are needed before you can become part of these things. Rajiv Malhotra is a private citizen who has done more research than a lot of these researchers have done, frankly, but he won't have the space because he does not have the credentials. Um, so there is a need to have our own scholars be part of this and counter this narrative, but unfortunately, we don't have it. Third question about parents. I can tell you, and this I call the so-called silver lining of all this, the amount of anger and amount of outrage among the Indian community masses is unbelievable at this time. Um, then, our group, we started with nobody, and right now the number of people who are willing to donate money or become part of it is just growing like hell because they're all angry. They know for sure that what is being propagated, like this dismantling Hindutva globally and all that, they all know it's basically a bunch of nonsense, and they don't know what to do. So I think this is a great opportunity for us to organize our community and find a way to prepare our children. You were part of the workshop that we did in our organization, Vibhuti, in which we talked about orientation for college-bound students. We don't want our children to go to college, spend 4 years, and come back totally brainwashed. Before that I sort of use the term blank slate. We should not send our children to the universities as a blank slate on Hinduism so that they can etch anything they want on it, and the parents have the difficult task of erasing and rewriting. So I think a lot of work has been cut out for our community. You will not see this happening in the Jewish community because these children know what is happening. They're fighting on campus. They will not let anything like this be perpetrated against their religion. Unfortunately, our Indian community joins them, the people who are spreading Hinduphobia, just because they're not knowledgeable and they're gullible and they easily become part of it. So, yeah, the short answer on my side is that academic credentials are needed to be part of this, and we don't have too many in that regard. And that the outrage is really being felt by the community, and hopefully something can be done with that outrage. Rajeev ji or Vibhuti, that's all. You're muted, Vibhuti.
I'm glad you pitched in with this on this subject matter. Rajeev ji, go ahead. Have your day.
Sure. So Vibhuti ji, you asked such a brilliant question that I would take more than 30 seconds or 1 minute that you probably had in mind for me. We are actually sitting at a confluence in which two streams flow in. And if you may allow me, I'll elaborate on what those two streams are. There's a stream of history from the United States where, the way I see it, there were people who supposedly fled religious persecution from other parts of the world, especially Europe, and came and settled, at least that's the history we are told, for religious freedom. And this is what ended up becoming the United States of America. Now, let us not forget that just because they fled religious persecution doesn't mean that they're not religious, right? What it meant is that when they came to the United States, they actually experimented a lot and delved a whole lot more, with much more enthusiasm, much more gusto, into searching for their own divinity, defining their own religion or religious practices, code of conduct, and whatnot. And out of that kernel came the educational institutes that we today revere, the Harvards of the world, the Cornells, the Yales, the Ivy Leagues, so to say. So now we have about 200 years of history where we have deeply religious people who, coming from a Protestant or a Catholic culture, were so experimental with their own religion that they actually created more sects than anywhere else in the world, just in Christianity alone, right? Sects that you would not find in the rest of the world. So the reason I'm trying to highlight that is that there is a genuine religious fervor in the United States that people do not understand. And that comes into our politics, that comes into our academia, that comes into our government, it comes in every part of our society. So we would be naive to think that a laboratory that vibrant in religious ideology will not have some sort of an overt or covert agenda against people of other faith. So that is the one stream. The other stream is that the parents that you are talking about are actually a generation that was educated and inculcated in the very leftist Marxist ideologies in places like JNU or in any other big city in India. Those are the parents we are talking about. And no offense here, but what Dr. Sinha said earlier, which is that he was fairly apolitical. This is the generation of Indians that moved into this country that was politically not affiliated or not interested. Our parents told us, don't worry about politics, go become a doctor, become an engineer, right? That is why we are apolitical. But here's the other problem. There is a fair segment of people who are not only apolitical, but they have no idea of their history because their JNUs did not tell them about their history of slavery and colonization, right? So here we are, two streams, the religious fervor in the United States and a set of parents or a society of parents who have no idea of their history, who were actually told not to indulge in history and politics. And this is the perfect spark that that can light up a situation like that. So that's where we are at the moment.
That's so brilliant. That's so brilliant to hear about it, and that you use the word colonization, and we are all part of the same process where we were considered smart if we were apolitical. Hum kisi ka side nahi lete hain, right? We were so spiritual that everybody's alike. That's where we fell into the trap of the colonial mindset that led to denigrating our own culture, our own traditions, and who we are. So we were what I would say that as an analysis of things, we ended up becoming India Born Confused Desis, because neither did we have the educational moorings, nor our spiritual teachings, which were very, very vital. We come here, we naturally produce American-born confused desis because we did not inculcate in them the sense of our culture and tradition, and we all ended up becoming Hindus in name only. Look at how this acronym has played out in our lives, and today we are bearing the impact of that, the negative impact of that. We are losing ourselves, but because we had so-called awareness and knowledge about our historical, beautiful past of Ramayana and Mahabharata, so people like us are revolting that no, we are not as bad as we are projected out to be. We are not evil people, right? So this is what we are contesting. So what do we need to do to decolonize that mind of those Indians who have ended up hating Hindus? Is because of the fact that it's denigrating things Indian and things Hindu, looking down upon our processes and our way of life. How does this matter get contested? Have you ever tried to deal with this scenario in the particular way that we are confronting? Because if we do not address the root, then we will again be fighting on, battling a leaf here or a branch there.
Vibhuti ji, if I may, I want to finish off the confluence story a bit.
Please do.
So we are at this confluence, and let us not ignore what happened in the United States just pre-war and post-war, and I'm talking about the Second World War, right? And which was that there was a legitimate or a concocted fear of communists in this country, right? And what that resulted in was what we call as McCarthyism, and that is a tool and ideology that these very Marxist professors in academia, these very communist left-leaning, progressive, so to say, those who call themselves progressive, are now utilizing against us. They are being McCarthyists in their approach of just annihilating anybody, sidelining, squashing any sense of or semblance of logic in the debate. They are leaving no space and room for debate, right? So what is needed is many things, but more importantly, what is needed is that, especially given this conference, that we remind our educational institutes that you are centers of learning. We demand our university presidents and deans and faculty that you are centers of learning. You're not centers of political movements. The idea of education, as per the Hindu view of, is paksh and vipaksh, or tark, or logic, reasoning, rhetoric. Not just rhetoric. Where's logic and reasoning today, right? So that is what we are trying to do. I'll stop right there because I think Dr. Sinha probably can give us more of a strategic line on this from in at least university. So over to you, Dr. Sinha.
Well,
Thank you.
I think these movements, liberal movements taking roots in campuses, is not uncommon. It happened during Vietnam War, the hippie movement. But I think now it has gone, as you mentioned correctly, in a very different direction. Attacking a group of people, a minority in this country, attacking religion is, in my opinion, it's new. I think except Jews who have been attacked, I don't think we see that systematically happening. And I think that's a new pattern that I'm seeing, and it's pretty much emanating from critical race theory, which has become a dominant paradigm in research. In campuses, it has become a basis for justifying the oppression of blacks, which, in my mind, it did happen. It is a very serious issue when it comes to race relations in this country, and this country has not done enough, and African Americans to this date are suffering because they never did anything. Using the same paradigm of critical race theory on Hindus and India is first and foremost highly inappropriate, and I think we don't have scholars who have dismantled that. We need to dismantle it, and you can do that in two different ways. A, show that it does not apply to us. B, even if you believe it applies to us, what has India done to address that issue? And I think that's where the contrast is really black and white, not a good analogy, but that's what it is. US has not done anything meaningful to bridge the gap between the African Americans and the white majority. We still see huge discrepancies on literally every metric, despite affirmative action and civil rights movement to this date. Civil rights movement has been over 50 years old now, more than 50, but we haven't seen any visible matrices that will give us some hope. And that is why we see the Black Lives Movement. That's why we see all these movements which are legitimate. But putting the Brahmanical patriarchy and attacking the structures of Hinduism with the same paradigm is a very, very ill-conceived paradigm, ill-conceived application, and highly inappropriate. Just look at what India has done. India forced a reservation system, whether you like it or not. India forced it, and now we have these people are called the oppressed class. We simply say the minority community or the backward class. They are everywhere. They have taken top positions. Modi ji, our prime minister, itself belonged to backward class. We have done so much for women. We have done so much for all these so-called oppressed minorities by this paradigm that USA does not even come close. So they don't talk about any of those things that Hindus or India has done to fix the historical inequities. And it is portrayed in that Western lens, in perspective, to make us look bad. And I think this conference is partly reflecting that, when no one will talk about what has been done to fix it and how much progress India has made compared to USA, which has done nothing. So I'll stop here on that. Thank you.
Sinhaji, the request is that you could speak a bit louder to be clear, so that some people are unable to hear you. So that said, that's a very important point, is that, a culture flourishes only when its educational system imparts sense of mission to youth and and it just trains them in the discipline. What holds back the Hindu leadership of today? Why are we not able to narrate our story to others? Because who will write our story? Who will create our narrative if we don't do it? Why do we expect Audrey Truschke? If you leave it to people like that, we know, we don't need to name names here, how Indian narrative, the Hindu narrative, has been distorted. And I know that Hindu American Foundation was set up for this purpose, to have an interlocution with the policymakers to correct challenges the way it existed. So now, the other part which comes to my mind is, where do we go from here? This was the question that Sinhaji earlier mentioned.
Yeah.
Where do we go from here?
Yeah.
जानते तो सब कुछ है. Now we know we do not need to blame anybody for anything. I belong to the school of thought that if I let something happen, it's my responsibility. We let it happen. Others are doing to us. Knowing what we know now, where do we go from here? Sinhaji, you wanted to talk about the future, and I'm always concerned about where do we go from here?
Well, where we go from here, Vibhuti ji, is many things that we have to do. Unfortunately, there is no one pill we can take and change our future. But the most important one that I want to highlight, especially talking about Hindu American Foundation, is this idea that in the last about 6 years or so, maybe 7 years, especially since the BJP government has come into power, what we are noticing is that what used to be an attack on Hinduism, by equating Hinduism to social ills like, oh, Indian rivers are polluted, let's blame Hindus. There's corruption in India, let's blame Hindus. That was what Hinduphobia was, that was what attack on India was, or used to be prior to 2014. But ever since the BJP government has come in, now economy is not growing, that's a Hindu problem. Minorities are not feeling safe, that's the Hindu problem. Basically, what has become, what was the social ill of Hinduism as it was portrayed, now has also become a political ideology or political blame on the Hindus. The reason I'm stating that is because that has not gone unnoticed, as Dr. Sinha said. A lot of parents, a lot of people like us are noticing how unfair this is, how grave the situation is, and they are getting activated. Now, at HAF, as much as we educate, here's one thing we would like everybody to do, and this is where we can provide a lot of support, and we do, which is that our people are becoming more engaged, but we want to take them and we want to help them cover the journey, as I call it, from ads to advocacy. And what I mean by that, if I may shine light on it, is that we now see Hindu activists, we now see Hindu parents, we now see Hindu citizens reach out to their politicians. We now see them in civic forums and public forums and town halls, right? But what we see right after that is their picture on Facebook with some politician or their local elected leader or a senator or a congressman. So that is advertisement in my mind. They're advertising that they are connected. Now let's take that to advocacy. How can we enable the very same people to now sit across the table from a politician or a candidate and talk about Hindu issues, tell their story, ask, what will you do for me, Hindu American? What will you do for prosperity of all people? What will you do for planet? What will you do for these false narratives in our universities that our kids have to endure every day, propaganda, right? So from ads to advocacy, and that is where HAF comes in. We help a lot of people transition, go through that journey, enable them, equip them to have those right conversations, as much as we do, of course, in the background.
You're muted, Vibhuti.
I will follow up this conversation with identifying the root cause of our Hindu problem. And Rajeev ji mentioned, and I have been said this many times by most of my American friends, that your story is so rich. Why don't you tell us about it? One of the things which has been there, that we have been our own poor advocates because we did not know. We chose to remain apolitical, ended up becoming apathetic. That's what is important for us to know. So my suggestion is here is that in the US context, I have been talking about the Hindus getting engaged in the local communities that we live in and the institutions that we have. All right. Your thoughts on that? How do we get more engaged
Okay.
and active? Because that's a quite a big of a chola change,
Yeah,
because जो हम
very
जो
much
नहीं
so.
थे, वो हमें करना पड़ेगा अब on a no
Yeah.
choice basis.
No, you're absolutely right. So let me just talk to you about what next. Uh, we definitely need a national level, very well funded political action committee, like the Jewish community has. We need it definitely, without any question. We don't have it right now as well funded and as well organized as we would like. Secondly, to I think advocacy is very important. Our community has to engage and we have to be politically active, but we also have to see what their next steps will be. And they're predictable. I think, this conference shocked everyone, it shocked me too. But if you give some critical thought, we should know where these people are headed. Very soon, I can tell you there will be issues of sanctions against India. That is their next step. And there are a lot of Democrat and I believe some Republicans, not too many, who have become part of this BDS movement against Israel. We will be lumped in that category. And there will be, there is no ifs and buts about that in my mind. That's where they're headed. So, first, they're doing the groundwork to make a case for it. Once they make that case effectively, and I'm sure there'll be more attacks on Hindutva in the days to come and Hinduism. Once they make an effective case, it will be tied to politicians in India. Once it is tied to those politicians, and I think Yogi Adityanath is a very rich target for them. There have been articles written on them on Wall Street Journal and Washington Post, which are not flattering, but that's the groundwork that is being done. And then eventually there will be a push towards putting sanctions on India, like the way they're doing on Israel. I just want to warn the audiences that we are not as powerful politically as the Jewish political action committees are. We are not even 10% of what they are. If we don't have that in place, we will be in trouble. It's only a matter of time. And then we'll be wondering, like the way we are wondering right now, what happened. So there is a lot that has to be done. Uh, I think I can just talk briefly about what you mentioned, Vibhuti, is about how we can engage. Uh, we are, I've created that in our wine. There are a lot of people from different parts of the country who are in my group who are trying to do the same thing in their cities. The underlying idea is to engage your Congress people, Congresswomen, Congressmen, educate them, but also be very clear on what agenda they need to pursue on your behalf. Politicians need guidance. You can give them a good long lecture on Hinduism and they'll be bored because as you know, they're politicians. They're not they're not in the business of getting educated about religion. So we need to have a very clearly laid out agenda to them and be clear that what they can and what they cannot vote against us. And we are doing it. And I'll tell you one good example which we are doing. We are meeting the congresswoman locally here in a very private setting. And I've invited multiple people in my group to come. Typically, these are fundraisers, you have to give money. I'm inviting them by paying for them, and they will come and they will get a chance to meet the members of Congress. We need to bring our community to the politicians. They should understand what power they can have, and they should exercise. So I think I agree with everything Rajiv ji said. It's very important that we have advocacy, educate them, and then the only thing I'll add is we need a national level organization which is more powerful. And I think there are attempts which are being made, but our community is not that unified. Thank you.
Vibhuti ji, if I may.
Go ahead. I just wanted to also add one more thing before you started saying, and because political engagement is a must, and remaining engaged with our local communities is a must. You see, there is one thing very important. Indian congressmen who are there in the US House of Representatives, we don't have a senator yet, but Indian congressmen, you are right, Praveenji, that they don't depend on our votes to win the election, but they definitely want our money. So the question is, that's where the money talks. Rajeev, please do tell us about one thing is that have you guys been able to interact with the Rokhannas and the guy who is there are several other Ami Bera and Raja Krishnamurti, Pramila
Pamela
Jaipal,
Jaipal.
who are Pramila Jaipal is openly anti-Modi, anti-Hindu, anti-India for everything else. Raja Krishnamurti plays a safer game, whereas Ro Khanna is a Pakistan caucus member. So my thought process is that how are these people responding to this crisis? I would call it a crisis. This particular anti-dismantling Hindutva globally is dismantling Hinduism globally in a way. So the question is, what are their views on it? Because they are Hindus too.
Absolutely. So as you might imagine, at HAF, we talk to everybody. This is not as Praveen said, this is not a Democratic candidate problem or a politician problem. This is not a Republican problem. This is a Hindu versus non-Hindu problem at this point. Let's be honest about it.
Yeah.
And interaction and engagement and advocacy and activism with our elected leaders is HAF's strength. So without taking names or naming names, let us try to understand what is happening with these candidates that you named in particular, which all seem to be from the Democratic Party, I believe, is that within their own party, there is a far left progressive group. I believe in California, the Progressive Caucus is the largest caucus in the California Democratic Party. And they have hijacked the party to an extent where they're willing to sacrifice their own candidates. So between them, the Khalistanis and the various other, the South Asian faculty, the South Asian scholarly activists, they have hijacked the party to an extent where, look what happened to the congressional run or race in Texas. They sacrificed their own candidate over there, right? So the point is that we are neck deep, if not already drowned, in a situation where our politicians have been compromised, where we have not done our part, where we have to now start understanding, to Dr. Sinha's point, that if we are not politically active or politically relevant, but want to donate money, that now we start to influence and assert and donate more to their campaigns, donate more to organizations like HAF, so that we can do this on behalf of the community, which is represent the Hindu interest to our politicians, regardless of what party they are in. As you might imagine, now I want to directly answer your question. The Pramila Jaipals of the world, the Rokhannas of the world, those who sit on the Pakistan caucus, those who have openly come out against the Modi government, we have to realize that Hindutva or Hinduism or attack on this is not their primary concern. Their primary concern, as it seems to me, is about Modi, is about BJP. Their biggest problem right now is RSS, and they'll do anything to link RSS, first of all, falsely calling it whatever they call it, to their BJP and then to the Hindus and mix it all together, call it Hindutva, a political ideology, and then try and kill it. So that is what we are in the middle of. But I also want to add something to the word storytelling that you talked about. We have told a lot of story about Hindutva. We have told a lot of story about how the academics in this country, have denied genocides, how they have supported extremist movements, how they have supported Hinduphobia, how they have kind of questioned the subcontinental integrity of India by removing the word India and calling it South Asia. But what we have not told is, what does an average student on a campus in the United States feel about what is unfolding around him or her? What does a professor at a university like Dr. Sinha, what is their future? How safe or unsafe do they feel? Not just academic freedom I'm talking about, personal freedom. How much scrutiny are there? Those are the stories that we have now got to start telling. We've got to start telling stories about what is happening to our leadership, senior leadership in corporate America, which is facing very same onslaught, maybe on a different front, maybe on the front of caste. They are being questioned about their leadership skills. They are being questioned about how fit they are to be the CEOs of this company. They are being accused of being casteist and discriminatory. So those are the stories that we now have to build and come out.
Thank you very much, Rajeev, for virtually knowing my mind, because I'm very happy to share with all of you and the audiences who are watching this show that at Jaipur Dialogue we have prepared a set of questions which we are going to send to the universities and the students, asking them about the friendliness of Hindu universities with Hindus. That is a very interesting question that has come about, and we are going to send it. We are going to share with you in the future what responses we get from the universities and the students therein. We are coming to the end of the show. We have a couple of questions which I would want Praveen ji and Rajeev ji to address. So, viewers, like, share, subscribe to the channel. Not only Jaipur Dialogue India, but Jaipur Dialogue USA, which was started with the intent to rebuild our Hindu narrative and our Hindu story, the Indian story. The entire narrative of India needs to change. We have to reposition ourselves. So like, subscribe, press the bell icon, and support us with whatever you can. So let's get on with the questions. Thank you. We have the first question is Word Tech. She is now openly making fun of Mahabharata. She, I think, Truske, is openly making fun of Mahabharata and its characters on Twitter. She's attacking Hindus under the shadow of Hindutva keyword. How do we address that? What is the solution? Either one of you can take the shot at that.
I think Rajiv ji might be in a better position to do that. I think HAF has taken a lot of these people to the court. If you can talk a little bit more about it, I think that's the first recourse that we have. Twitter is is not the place to settle these disputes. People spew a lot of poison there. So I'll let Rajiv ji take this one.
Absolutely. So as you all might know, or our viewers might know, there's an active lawsuit right now between HAF and several parties, including Audrey Trushke. So I would not like to talk about the specifics of that at this point. That said, this boils down to the problem of dharma and adharma. What we are witnessing is a battalion of adharmics, if I may use the word. And let us first of all strap ourselves up and get a little bit excited about the battle that is in front of us. So this is, in a matter of fact speaking, for me, a very interesting and optimistic moment, because what these adharmics are doing is raising our consciousness. They're highlighting to us the problems that we have been denying and sweeping under the rug so far. So I say we let them do this, but I say we do our part and educate and socialize what the adversaries of Hindus are capable of doing, what they are capable of stooping to, right? But then do it in a manner where everybody understands that this is our real enemy. This is what we have to fund to fight for. So that would be my ask for it. I'm not dejected by what is happening. I just take it as the yin and yang of the world. I'm so glad it is out in the open right now.
Thank you.
I'll just add one thing to that.
Yeah.
I think sometimes you have to let them commit the crime before you serve them the punishment. I'll say we can learn something from the Muslim community in USA. After 9/11, they were subjected to extreme hatred in this country. And if you go back and look at how CARE managed it, now if you say anything against them, it's very quickly labeled as Islamophobia, because there's established record of hatred towards Muslim. So to some extent, those of you who are troubled by it, I have a reason to believe that when more and more of this is done, it will become the basis for establishing a precedence and taking more stronger actions against those people. So yes, as troubling as it is, let them commit the crime, let them reveal their cards. We will have to, courts and other places will determine their fate, and we have to become socially very active to point it out when it happens. So that's my take on it.
Next question, please. Pratik is asking, how are organizations like ISKCON playing a part in overseas? I'm sorry to say most Indian Americans are still obsessed with white man's validation. Praveenji, your thought on it.
ISKCON, I'll let Rajiv ji answer that part. ISKCON, he's closer to the Hindu organizations.
Right. Rajeev ji, you
I can answer the second one.
Okay.
Are the
Sure.
Indian Americans still obsessed with the white man's validation? Unfortunately, yes. And I think a lot of people point out that's the colonial mindset. But I think we have to change, and I think we are changing. So I will say, don't be so discouraged by it. We have to educate our own community, and when they see these things coming from the community they're trying to get the validation from, soon it will change. So there are a lot more people who have to point out what you just stated, Pratikji. And if you do more and more of this, I think the the consciousness will come in. People will start realizing what this is, and I think it is happening. So I will say, don't be discouraged. Let Rajivji take the ISKCON part.
Sure. So I think, Pratik, first of all, I'm not aware that this is at all in the charter of ISKCON, because they are in the business of raising Krishna consciousness, and it doesn't matter if you're white or black, Indian or American, Muslim or Hindu or Christian. So we do not, as a community, should not expect them to get engaged in this, other than doing their part, which they are wonderful at. And they do it regardless of it's a professor they are in front of, or a doctor, or a politician, or whatnot. So overall, ISKCON is a big asset to the dharmic values, and let's let them be at what they're good at.
I think the question, the way I lead it, are they taking any positions or trying to come out as being misrepresented by these groups? Or they simply keep on going with their business and don't care about what others say? I think that's what he's coming to. So I get a sense from you, Rajiv, that they are simply going on with their business. They are not in the business of defending themselves.
Yeah, not politically inclined.
They will defend themselves. Let us not forget that ISKCON actually faced the biggest battle it had when Prabhupada was still alive in New York. I believe it was in a New York court, and they won that lawsuit. So the point is that A, first of all, I'm not aware of what they're doing, but B, should they even be doing other than what they do? That is not they are not political activists. They are advocates of dharma. They are brand ambassadors of dharma. For them, everybody is alike, as long as it is raising the awareness and human consciousness. It would be a tall order for us to expect them to take positions on stuff like this, the way we at HAF do, or what you do, Dr. Sinha, as an advocate of Hindu Dharma with politicians. So my apologies, I do not know, but this is what I think.
Thank you. Next question, please. Oh, thank you, Pradeep Singh, for your generous contribution. Where is the toolkit? Or is it part of the toolkit?
Yeah. Well, so first of all, visit Hindu American Foundation's website. It's www.hinduamerican.org. Now, I don't know if toolkit is a socially acceptable word anymore or not, but there definitely are a lot of resources to educate ourselves on the issues, to understand the work that HAF is doing. We do a lot of webinars. There's a webinar coming up in a few days. I believe it is on August 31st, on what is Hinduphobia, what is the source of it, how do you explain Hinduphobia to your neighbor, to your political candidates, to your elected leaders, to your school teachers. So I would highly recommend that everybody attend that. We do these often, but this one is going to be special, especially because of what is unfolding around us.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'll just answer that part also. I have not seen the toolkit, Pradeep Singh ji. I think you're right. There should be one. I haven't seen one. There have been a lot of tools thrown around, but the tools have not been put into place to achieve a desired outcome like these groups, anti-Hindu groups have been doing. So the question is valid. I hope we get a chance to work on it. A lot of us are trying to do things, but at this time, I will say, unfortunately, the answer is I'm not aware of any toolkit. Thank you.
Next question, please. Achintyanath Saxena. Why there is no space for neutral people and academics today? The world seems too polarized now.
I can answer that.
Sure.
I'll take a take on that. I think that's a very, very valid question. And we have to ask this question, why have we become what we have become? Uh, uh, why is there so much insanity in the world? You see one group, you know, putting out tweets against Muslims, against Hindus, and it just grows exponentially. So, Achitanath ji, I will ask you to see the movie The Social Dilemma. There are a lot of articles written on that, but that movie will help you understand how these social media companies work. Unfortunately, India is one of the biggest consumers of social media, Facebook and WhatsApp. These are mechanisms for hardening your beliefs and turning you into something what you thought you were, but you become more hardlined into it. The content that is fed to you on Facebook and other platforms is designed to become more engaged, and you become more engaged when more, uh, I would say, explosive material is thrown in front of you. It's a serious problem. And people like me, I don't have a social media account anymore. I'm not on Facebook. I have a very minimal Twitter account. And the only place where I do go, where I find some civility, is Clubhouse. That too in certain rooms where I can have a engaged conversation. And I engage with people from Pakistan. I engage with Muslims. I engage with people with opposite thought. And if you can do that in a civil fashion, I think you've achieved a lot. So I agree with you that we don't have neutral places anymore. The whole world is getting polarized. Till we have that awareness and uh, feel the responsibility that we are not going to become pawn to this game that is being played to make money by these corporations which are in social media. Um, so I think very, very, very good question, and I hope more people think about it and see to it that they don't take a radical position one way or the other. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Next question. Mithul Panchal. Modi is facing a court case in USA for 2002. Can we file a case against Biden for doing the same thing in Afghanistan? That Rajeev ji, if you want to take a shot at it, short answer to this.
Yeah, sure. Mithul, I appreciate the sentiment behind the question. The bigger question, though, is what do we achieve out of all of this? Practically nothing. I'm a fan of the idea you have. The practicality of it prevents me from pursuing the idea any further. It's just my humble opinion.
Thank you. Next, please. Achint Nath Saxena again. I think people like Trushke want attention and therefore deliberately provoke. Best to be ignored. Giving attention to them empowers them. Since she is a professor, I will ask the professor to answer that question. Do you seek to attention to need empowerment?
I think she does not need attention. She's doing it deliberately. She's part of an agenda. So let's be very clear about this. This is not somebody who's simply seeking attention. And she's done a good amount of work, and she keeps on doing it. Maybe she believes in what she does. That will be very unfortunate, because that means there's a lot of hatred brewing in her, which does not bode well. I will not like to do any research which turns me into a very negative person. I think we can ignore it, but I can assure you that more such thing will come in front of you, and you should understand where the trajectory of these actions is. So I talked about that earlier. All these things, when perpetuated again and again, become a part of the belief system, and then eventually actions could be taken. And I think India has to be careful. India has to be. We are becoming a power, and they will do everything to bring India down. Some, not everyone, but some. So I would say, listen to her. Don't take it in a benign fashion. Try to devise a strategy so that we can counter the narrative that is being created. And she's only a small part of the bigger narrative. So in that way, you can be correct. But there are bigger forces behind it. That's all I would say. Thank you.
That's very correct. And I have only one thing to say on this particular question. Best to be ignored? Certainly not. Remember one thing. Taking the opposition for granted is the first step to lose the war. You never play your opponent ignoring his presence, his or her presence in the field. Any team can beat anyone any given Sunday. It's all about a missed penalty or a dropped catch or a fatal run out. Remember that part. So I would put it this way, that don't ignore, be cognizant, because Audrey Tushke may be one of the thousands of professors in the United States, but look what her work is doing to us. So don't ignore, don't take for granted, stay engaged, and be cognizant of what your enemy is doing. Next question, Mr. Mithilesh Kumar. I heard about engaging politicians from esteemed guests, but not about engaging the people of US in various communities. Uh, Praveenji, since this question is directed towards you because you talked about engaging the politicians.
Well, we are trying to engage both. We are trying to raise awareness in our community so that they're fully aware of the issues. They understand what it means. They don't take it lightly. Some, events that are happening around us that may have consequences. So, but it is not an easy thing to engage our people. As immigrants, a lot of them come and they're struggling with a lot of issues in this country. I've been here for close to 40 years, and so have you been, Vibhuti ji. So we are settled here, we know, but those who come lately, and are younger and have come more recently, there are a lot of challenges. They have to work towards making a living, educating their children, asking them to devote resources and time and money is not easy. And I'll just make a small comment here regarding Sanatan Dharma that we have and other religions. Other religions are organized. Sikhism is organized. Christianity is organized. Islam is organized. And some of these religions require a mandatory donation, and people visit the place of worship on a regular basis, and that's how they remain engaged. We don't have anything like that. When people go to temple, they go for for their own personal peace and attain what they want to attain. So it is a challenge, but our community will have to think of ways to find a way to engage people in a more sustained fashion and keep them educated, which is what we are trying to do here in my efforts. But I'm sure I'm not the only one. There are a lot more people who are doing that.
Vibhuti ji, if I may answer Mithilesh ji's question.
Just bear in mind, we have crossed an hour and we have 4 more questions to go. So just keep your answers sharp and short.
Absolutely. So Mithilesh ji, it is actually not true that we are not engaging various communities. HAF does wonderful work doing that, especially in the interfaith communities with other religious organizations and religious bodies. But I also have to call out various Hindu organizations that are working in every city across the nation that actually do that day in and day out. And there's one more I want to call out, which is visit Hindu Speakers Bureau. Search for that word. That is a new organization coming up, which is basically chartered. Its charter is to engage various communities. And also, if you find time, look for Hindu American Foundation's YouTube channel and look at all the webinars we have done with various communities. So with that, over to you, Vibhuti ji.
Thank you. Next question, please. Achintyanath Saxena again. If today Osho was alive, Hindus would have probably killed him or taken him to court. We are too insecure nowadays and dislike spiritual rebels. A very profound thought. I would allow any one of you to take your shot, but only one of you.
Rajeev ji will take it.
Okay, Rajeev ji will take it. Fine.
Well, here's what I would say, and this is a profound thought, Achintya ji, but the only thought that crosses my mind is that there were, I believe, 3 attempts on the life of Buddha himself. This has always happened. This will continue to happen. This is what I meant when I said that dharma and adharma coexist. That is the nature of the universe. That is the world around us. And now, if I may also add that the people who wanted to kill Buddha were not somebody outside from another town. They were his own cousins or his own disciples or monks that were competing with him. So let's not be disheartened by that. That's where I'll stop.
That's very nice. Next question, please. Achintya again. ISKCON has declared war on non-ISKCON sects. Puri Shankaracharya, Ramakrishna Mission et al. Are heretics and deserve hellfire according to ISKCON. Rajeevji, your thoughts again on this.
Let us not spread hatred here, especially on this forum. I don't, my personal belief, I don't believe that is true. Personally, I don't think that Sri Prabhupada ever said or used words or would have recommended something like hellfire for anybody. So let us not confuse here. And this is a bigger discussion for some later on. There may be competing views of the world, but that does not mean that everybody else is a heretic.
Thank you. Next question. Ravindra Kumar, thank you very much for your contribution. Appreciate that. Poonam Abi, who has filed the case against Modi in US? What do they and US hope to gain? And what do you think they will do to Modi? Hang him like Saddam Hussein? I think Poonamji is angry and she knows about that. We all know that the case was, Congress party inspired, and everybody knows that. But if you want to throw some highlight on it, you can go ahead, Rajeevji. If you
no, I will not. I will not take that risk. That is that issue is a non-issue to me.
That's right. It is a non-issue. Nobody cares for that. Mithul Panchal. Audrey received a scholarship from Pak government, as I read somewhere. Also, she's having evangelicals family member running conversion in India. Yes, we have heard about that. That brings to a very different question altogether, and I would request Praveen to address that. Is conversion, how do we address that challenge of conversion in India in the name of, I believe freedom of religion is a farcical concept.
I'm going to just answer the first part first, is that if she has these connections which have come out over time that we have learned, it is very unethical for somebody to not do a full disclosure of conflict of interest, especially when you're doing a religious study. Having a strong interest and played a strong role in activities which are which are basically propagating your agenda, requires a serious disclosure of your conflict of interest, which I don't think she ever did. I hope this is brought up in academic circles, because this is unethical in my mind. How much she has disclosed, how much she has not disclosed, is coming out more now. And I think, to me, as an academic researcher, it's a very serious concern. If I write a research paper in which I recommend stocks of certain nature and do not disclose that this is my trading strategy, it could be a serious problem for me. So same thing under religious studies. If you are taking such activist role against a certain religion and writing academic papers in the name of academic honesty and academic freedom, to me, it's a very serious concern, and they should be looked into it. So this is a very good question. Vibhuti ji, you had a question also on that.
No, I'm not going to. This we're talking about. This one is religious conversion. That is, I think we will keep an issue on that later on, full discussion. But Rajeevji, you wanted to say something.
Well, Vibhuti, to your question, let us first acknowledge that the two leading faiths of this planet have conversion and proselytization as the core ethic. It is a moral obligation of a follower to do that. So let us not, first of all, deny that this is not a fringe or a side phenomenon. This is the kernel. That said, how does India solve the problem of it? Well, we have to solve it from a dharmic perspective. We have to share our view and say, as per dharmic perspective, proselytization should not be allowed. It is actually violence against a Hindu, and frame this conversation in that perspective and solve this. But we'll solve that word problem
later on. And I have always said this, and I advocate that conversion is a sin against God's original intent. If God wanted us, He is the ultimate maker for all of us. The three of us could have been anything between Christianity, Islam, Judaism, and Hinduism. But we are who we are. God made us so. So I confront Christians and Muslims on this account, to those people I know, is that conversion, isn't it a sin against God's original intent? Who are you to change my name? And who designed, Who determined that X is the only way to heaven or hell? We don't have that concept. So this is a conversation for another day. And I totally agree with you, Rajeev, that this is the battle of dharma and adharma, and we have reached that stage. We have to rise for that. Next question, please. Thank you to all viewers. Please like the video, subscribe the channel, press the bell icon, and support us. So thank you very much. I will end this, however, with a lesson which I drove from Bhagavad Gita in chapter 18. Krishna tells Arjuna that to be successful in battle and war anywhere else, you have to first create the platform and then empower people, prepare them, then create the means and tools like what we talked about, and then put in your full effort and then leave it to God. So unless and until we are firm and secure on creating the base that will make us propel ourselves to do things further, we will not achieve anything. Dream, as the saying goes, this is my phraseology, hope may not be a strategy, and it is not, but the strategy gives you hope. It depends on which type of game you are playing, T20, 50 over, or a 5-day test match. With these words, thank you very much. See you next week. Thank you, Praveen. Thank you, Rajeev, for joining us. This is my longest show, 1 hour, 16 minutes. So thank you very much to both of you to make it so engrossing and enlightening for everybody involved.
Thank you, Vibhuti very much for inviting, and thank you, Rajeev for your insightful comments.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Satyameva Jayate.